Part 2 of why I'm terrified of babysitting again. Like I said, when the mom came home after I left, she told me that the kids were gone. So I described to her the man that I saw in the house that I thought was the dad, and she told me that was the ex-husband who had a spare key to their house. But she did not believe me right away. At first, she was asking me a lot of questions, acting as if I was the one who kidnapped them. Almost as if she was accusing me of kidnapping. And you know what? Those feelings were right. Obviously, the police had to get involved, and when I spoke to them, they told me that the mom wanted to know if I knew where the kids were. And I had already told her about the man that I saw. But they said that they would also look into the ex-husband as well. So she kind of believed me, but didn't 100%. I was literally being accused of kidnapping 3 kids. But they were looking more into me because her ex-husband lived in Colorado. We lived in Kansas. So I was a prime suspect up until they interviewed the dad, and he gave himself up like for part 3 of why I'll never babysit again. So like I said, they were finally able to interview the dad, but it took a while because he lived in a different state. But when they interviewed him, he mentioned this girlfriend that he had. It was his current girlfriend, and so they asked him where she lived and all that good stuff. Well, the police decided that they were going to question the girlfriend as well. So they went over to the girlfriend's house, they knocked on the door, and as soon as they knock on the door, the police hear a child crying. The dad didn't mention anything about his girlfriend having kids. And the next thing you know, a toddler runs up to the door. A toddler that looks exactly like one of the kids that I was babysitting. And so the police arrested the girlfriend, and the police arrested the dad for kidnapping 3 children. Mom finally got her kids back, and everything was good. The kids were not harmed in any way. This all happened in the span of like a week or 2. The mom actually ended up coming to me and personally apologizing about how she acted. But I told her it was no biggie because anybody would act like that in a situation where their kids were gone. And I continued to babysit her kids. Here's another babysitting horror story, and how my babysitter almost killed me and my baby sister. So it first started when my parents hired a babysitter for us. At first she was really sweet, and then she started being really mean out of nowhere. She started hitting us when we would cry, and she would blow cigarette smoke in our face. One time when she was driving us home from the grocery store, my baby sister was crying really hard the whole entire car ride. When we got home, she got me out of the car and brought in the groceries, but she left my 2-year-old sister in the car. It was 103 degrees. And she left her in there. That's honestly when I first started becoming scared of her. But why I became terrified of her is because one time my parents went on vacation for like a week. And one night my babysitter ordered pizza. My parents sent the babysitter the money for it. It was for all of us, but she wanted to get anchovies on the pizza. I told her I didn't really want that, but she ordered it anyway. When the pizza came, I didn't really want to eat it. And instead of her being like, well, I'll just make you something else, she locked me into a room for 3 days. She would only let me out to use the bathroom, but I wasn't allowed to eat anything. After that, she made starving us a regular thing. Then my parents came back and took us to the hospital for a checkup, like for part 2. This is part 2 of my babysitting horror story. So like I said, my parents came back from vacation and took us to the hospital for a checkup. They took us to the hospital because they noticed we were getting really skinny. When we got to the hospital, the doctor said my 2-year-old baby sister only weighed 19 to 20 pounds. And I was 13 at the time. I only weighed 90 pounds. The look on my mom and dad's face was enough. So when we got back into the car, I finally told them about what the babysitter had been doing. Now hold on tight, because the way my mama reacted to this, you would have thought somebody possessed her. Immediately, my mom started going off on my dad, like yelling and screaming at him. And he just had his hands in his face. I was so confused as to what was going on. See, I didn't know my dad when I was younger. He passed away before I was born. And so I found out that my current dad at the time wasn't my real dad. And I didn't know the truth until this whole babysitting situation. She babysat me for like a month, and then my parents fired her. I'm 23 now. I honestly could have forgotten all about her. Well, just last year, my mom told me that babysitter was my dad's ex-wife. Well, anyways, this is what my mom did to my stepdad's ex-wife after we went to the hospital. This is part 3 of my babysitting horror story. So like I said, I finally told my parents about what the babysitter had been doing to me and my baby sister. I was so confused as to why my mom started going off on my dad right away after I told her. But 10 years later, I'm finally finding out that my babysitter was my stepdad's ex-wife. My mom told me that she had been really iffy about letting my stepdad's ex-wife babysit me and my little sister, but she only agreed with it to save money. So my mom told my dad to get out of the driver's seat. She got into the driver's seat and she started driving. I wasn't exactly sure where we were going, and my dad didn't know either, but we ended up at the babysitter's house. Luckily for her, she wasn't home because my mom would have dropped her. Shit, she might have even got a murder charge that day. But my mom told me to get a rock and to just start chucking them at her windows. So that's what I did. There, me and my mom were chucking rocks at my babysitter's window. And my dad was watching us holding my baby sister. My mom didn't take her to court or anything. I'm not exactly sure why. Probably something to do with my dad. But my mom made my dad cut contact with her completely, and they fired her. This is why Bring Your Pet to School Day is banned from my school. I just want everyone to know that this was bound to happen. The kids at my school are super irresponsible. I don't know why the teachers thought this was a good idea. I was one of those really irresponsible kids, and I didn't pay attention to which pets were allowed to be brought to the school. They weren't allowed to stink, they had to be a certain size, and you weren't supposed to bring them on the bus. If you were bringing a pet, you had to be a car rider. Well, I might have broken some of these rules. So I had a pet milk snake. It was about 3 feet in size, and I brought it to school without telling my parents because you had to get a parent signature form. And no, I was not a car rider. I brought it on the bus. I was carrying it in my backpack, and my backpack was all the way zipped up, so there was no way for it to get out. So I got on the bus, and then like 5 minutes later, my bus buddy got on the bus. Asked him, "Did you bring your pet to school?" He goes, "No, I'm on the bus, aren't I?" I was like, "Okay, I'm on the bus and I brought mine." He tells me we weren't allowed, and then he has to see it. When I opened my bag to show him, it wasn't there. Then I hear my bus driver scream, and she swerves the bus. This is part 2 of why Bring Your Pet to School Day is banned from my school. So like I said, I'm on the bus and I open my bag to show my friend my pet snake. But when I open my bag, it wasn't there. And then I hear the bus driver scream, and she swerves the bus. He yells that there's a snake on the bus, which causes panic. Kids start crying. Some try to jump out the bus window. Like, it was literal chaos. The bus driver almost crashed the whole bus. But she was able to steady it out. But nobody knew where this snake was. I honestly just try to act like I didn't know what was going on. Like, what snake? Never heard of her. Is that some type of drink? Anyways, so luckily, I looked across the seat from me. The seat in front of them, under it was the snake. My friend was sitting on the outside of the bus seat, so I told him to grab it. Try to get him to grab it before anybody sees it, but he didn't, so I just launched over there and I grabbed it, put it in my bag, and continued to act like nothing happened. Okay, so I'm running out of time, so I'm going to zoom past a little bit, but I'll come back on the next part. My school lets us carry our backpacks anywhere we want, so I had the snake in my backpack all day. But 2 periods before chemistry, I decided to let it loose so I could skip the class. So this is part 3 of why Bring Your Pet to School Day is banned from my school. Okay, so I'm backtracking a little bit. So after the snake was let loose on the bus, once we got to the school, somebody had to come onto the bus and figure out the situation, what was going on. They asked if anybody brought their pet on the bus. Obviously, I did not give myself up, and they ended up just concluding that a random snake got on the bus. Okay, so back to where I was at. I had a chemistry test that day as well. Like I said, I was very irresponsible, so I did not study for my test, nor did I care for this snake. So I knew the chaos that it would bring to let it loose, so that's what I did. So it could cause chaos, so then I didn't have to take my chemistry test. And half an hour after I let it loose, on the announcements, they tell everybody to stay in their rooms. There is a snake on the loose. Apparently, it was found in a bathroom in a toilet. Somebody sat down on that toilet and had the worst time discovering that snake. Low-key feel bad for them. Once they found it, they put it on the announcements that they found the snake and whoever lost it can come get it. They described it, so I went to go get it. Okay, so this is part 4 of why Bring Your Pet to School Day is banned from my school. Like I said, Jesus Christ, I almost died. So like I said, I went down to the office to claim my snake. I obviously got into a lot of trouble for that. They called my parents. My parents came down to the school. So I got suspended. My parents grounded me for months and months and months. I was not allowed to leave my house. I couldn't go out to see my friends. But I was only suspended for like a week. And when I went back to school, everybody knew that it was me who brought that snake to school. And so the person who sat down on the toilet seat and found the snake knew that it was me too. And that person didn't say anything to me, but I did get word that that person was very pissed because that snake went straight up there, you know. So after that, they just didn't allow kids to bring their pets to school anymore, which is reasonable. I kind of ruined it for everybody else, but I don't really care because it's not that serious. But people can't just hate on me because there was this other kid who brought a spider and it got loose in class, but they were able to find it really quickly, so it didn't escape the classroom or anything. But I did what I had to do, so story time of how I found out that my mom was actually my older sister. My older sister never really liked me as a child. We were never close. I never knew why, but I was guessing it was because of the 10-year age gap. But I'm pretty sure she hated me because she couldn't even look me in the eye. I cannot make this up. She would not look me in the eye. But she never really talked to my parents either. She kind of just kept to herself all the time. Sometimes I have vivid memories of when we were younger and she would always be arguing with my parents about something, and I always thought it had something to do with me. Well, I was right. It had everything to do with me because eventually my sister turned 18 and she moved out. For 2 years, I didn't talk to her at all. I honestly don't even think I had her number saved, and I'm pretty sure that she didn't have mine. Well, 2 years later, and I was 10 at the time, she reached out to me via social media. I'm not sure how she found my Instagram name, but it was just my name, so she probably just typed that in and found me. She DM'd me and told me that she wanted to talk about something very important and that she would like to talk over the phone. So we exchanged numbers and we called that same night. And she told me that when she was younger, my dad had taken advantage of her and gotten her pregnant and had me. This is part 2 of how I found out that my mom was actually my older sister. So like I said, my older sister had reached out to me via social media and told me that she was actually my mother. And so after we got off the phone that same night, I lost it at dinner and I went off on my parents and I screamed at them. And I told them that I would go to the police and tell them everything and I would tell them the truth unless they just let me live with my older sister. And they tried to explain themselves, and their reasoning was that they wanted to keep the family together because of their traditional values. And it would have just made their lives a lot harder going through all the court proceedings, so they just kept the family together. And so they clearly didn't want me to go into the police, so they said that I could go live with my older sister. So she came to get me, but she lived in a different state, so it kind of took a while. I still had to stay in the house for like a week or so before she came, but I packed all my stuff and I was ready to go. And when we went back to where she lived, we immediately called the police and told them everything. Fast forward a little bit, they did some DNA testing. My sister's DNA matched as my biological mother's, and then my dad was my biological father, and they saw how the ages just didn't match properly, so they took my father to jail. What's one really bad thing you did as a child that you kept secret for your entire life and didn't tell nobody? I'll go first. I got a lot of stories like this, but this is just one of them. So my mama used to put me in daycare, and in my daycare, we used to do field trips, and we went to the YMCA. So while we were in the pool, this one white kid comes up to me. He asked me, like, why are you black? And I was kind of embarrassed, but I wasn't mad at the kid. I was more embarrassed than I was mad. And I told him that my parents painted me every single day. And I was thinking back at the time when I scraped my knee and the skin came off and there was like no blood. It was just bone. But I didn't know that it was bone. I thought that I was just white underneath. So I was like, it's true, like I can peel my skin off and prove it. When I did that, I peeled skin off my finger and it was a lot of skin and I started bleeding really bad. So the water started getting red and the daycare people tried to get everybody out the water like there was something going on. And then once everybody was out of the water, one of the daycare people go, I'm so sorry, everybody. I lost my tampon. I need to find it. Okay, so what happened was pretty self-explanatory, but I can make a part 2 if you guys want. Okay, so this is part 2 of the really bad thing that I did as a child and kept secret. So my daycare instructor, or whatever you call them, basically said that she had lost her tampon in the water. And I'm guessing she said that because she was on her period and she had a tampon in and the water started turning red, and that's the only reason that she could think of. But like they started checking all the kids and making sure that all the kids were okay and stuff. And when they came up to me and asked me if I was good, I was like, oh yeah, I'm fine. And so they were looking in the water for like an hour, but there was no tampon. Like they could not find the tampon. Like that one white kid, he was not part of the daycare. Like he wasn't one of the daycare kids. So they evacuated everybody out the pool. Like nobody was allowed in there. And like we all got back on the bus and we went back to the daycare, and the daycare instructor, who thought she had lost her tampon, literally talked to all of us and was like, things like this can happen as a woman, and when you get older, you'll understand. But baby, I stayed mute. Ain't nobody know. One person knows, but hopefully she don't see this on her For You page. Sorry about it.